The date of June 28, 1914, began with sunshine and ceremony in the city of Sarajevo, then a provincial capital within the sprawling Austro-Hungarian Empire. Archduke Franz Ferdinand, the heir to the empire's throne, was visiting with his wife, Sophie, for a series of official engagements. The couple traveled in an open-topped car, part of a motorcade moving slowly through the city streets. This public appearance was intended to demonstrate the stability and reach of imperial power in a region simmering with nationalist fervor. The atmosphere was a mixture of official pomp and underlying tension, a combination that would soon prove to be fatal for the royal couple and catastrophic for the world. As the motorcade proceeded along the Apelki, a riverside road, the first attempt on the Archduke's life occurred. A young conspirator named Nedeljko Čebrinović threw a bomb at the Archduke's vehicle. However, the device bounced off the folded back roof of the car and exploded beneath the vehicle following behind, injuring several officers and onlookers. The Archduke and his wife were unharmed, but shaken. In a moment of fateful decision, Franz Ferdinand insisted on continuing with the day's schedule after a brief stop at the town hall, a choice that sealed his and his wife's tragic destiny in the annals of history. Following the initial failed attack, the planned route for the royal procession was supposed to be altered for safety. However, due to a severe breakdown in communication, the driver of the Archduke's car was not informed of the change. He mistakenly turned onto Franz Joseph Street, following the original itinerary. It was there, purely by chance, that another assassin, Gavrilo Princip, found himself standing. Having believed the assassination attempt had failed, Princip was lingering near a delicatessen when the Archduke's car unexpectedly appeared right in front of him, stalling as the driver attempted to reverse. This incredible stroke of bad luck for the Archduke was a golden opportunity for the assassin. Princip seized the moment, stepping forward and firing 2 shots from his pistol at point-blank range. The first bullet struck Sophie in the abdomen, and the second hit Franz Ferdinand in the neck. Both injuries proved to be mortal, and the couple died within minutes. The gunshots that echoed through the quiet Sarajevo street that morning would soon reverberate across the globe, setting off a chain reaction of political and military escalations that would ultimately plunge the world into its first great global conflict. The man who fired the fatal shots was Gavrilo Princip, a 19-year-old Bosnian Serb. He was not acting alone, but was part of a small group of young revolutionaries driven by a passionate belief in Serbian nationalism. Princip and his co-conspirators envisioned a future where the South Slavic peoples, including Serbs, Croats, and Slavons, would be liberated from Austro-Hungarian rule. They dreamed of creating a unified nation, a greater Serbia, or Yugoslavia. For them, Archduke Franz Ferdinand was not just a person, but a powerful symbol of the oppressive empire they desperately wanted to dismantle, making him a prime target for their revolutionary ambitions. These young assassins were supported and armed by a shadowy, secret society known as the Black Hand, or Ujedinjenje ili Smrt, meaning union or death. This was a powerful and clandestine nationalist organization with deep connections within the Serbian military and government. The Black Hand's official aim was to unite all territories with a South Slavic population into a single state. Its methods were ruthless, and it was willing to use terrorism and political assassination to achieve its goals. The group saw the Archduke's visit to Sarajevo as a direct provocation and an opportunity to strike a dramatic blow against their imperial overlords. The Black Hand provided the assassins with the necessary weapons, training, and logistical support for their mission. They supplied the pistols and bombs used in the attack and helped the young men cross the border from Serbia into Bosnia, which was then under Austro-Hungarian control. The leader of the Black Hand, Dragutin Dimitrijević, also known as Apis, was the chief of Serbian military intelligence. His involvement highlights the dangerous and blurry line that existed between state-sponsored activities and the actions of extremist nationalist groups in the volatile political climate of the Balkans before the war. Gavrilo Princip and his fellow conspirators were fully aware of the immense risks they were taking. They were driven by a fervent idealism, viewing their act not as murder but as a necessary sacrifice for the cause of national liberation. They saw themselves as martyrs willing to die for their dream of a unified South Slavic state, free from the control of foreign empires. This potent mix of youthful radicalism and powerful state-linked sponsorship created the perfect conditions for the assassination that would serve as the catalyst for a much larger and more devastating conflict, far beyond what they could have imagined. The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand did not occur in a political vacuum. In the years leading up to 1914, Europe was a continent fraught with deep-seated tensions, complex rivalries, and a web of military alliances that had divided it into two opposing armed camps. This precarious situation is often described as a powder keg, where any small spark could ignite a massive explosion. The primary forces at play were intense nationalism, imperial ambitions, a frantic arms race, and a rigid system of alliances that promised to turn any regional conflict into a continent-wide war, pulling nations into a fight they could not easily escape. On one side was the Triple Alliance, consisting of Germany, Austria, Hungary, and Italy. Germany, a relatively new but powerful industrial and military force, was eager to expand its influence and challenge the established global order. Austria-Hungary, a multi-ethnic empire struggling with internal nationalist movements, was desperate to maintain its grip on its diverse territories. On the other side was the Triple Entente, an alliance formed between France, Russia, and Great Britain. France was still bitter about its defeat by Germany in the Franco-Prussian War of 1870-71 and sought to regain its lost prestige and territory. Russia, styling itself as the protector of all Slavic peoples, had its own imperial ambitions in the Balkans, which brought it into direct conflict with Austria-Hungary's interests in the region. Britain, meanwhile, was the world's foremost naval and colonial power, and it watched Germany's growing naval strength and global ambitions with increasing alarm. The British foreign policy was centered on maintaining a balance of power in Europe, ensuring that no single nation could become dominant enough to threaten its vast empire. The rising power of Germany was seen as the most significant threat to this delicate equilibrium. This intricate network of alliances meant that a conflict between two nations could rapidly escalate. An Austro-Hungarian attack on Serbia would almost certainly draw in Russia to protect its Slavic ally. A Russian mobilization would trigger a response from Germany, which was bound by treaty to support Austria-Hungary. Germany's involvement would then compel France to join the war on Russia's side. The final crucial question was what Britain would do. Its commitment to the Entente was less formal, but the prospect of a German-dominated Europe was a scenario it was determined to prevent at all costs. The widely accepted historical account places the direct responsibility for the assassination squarely on the shoulders of Gavrilo Princip and his fellow conspirators, backed by the Black Hand. This mainstream view holds that the murder of Archduke Franz Ferdinand was fundamentally an act of Serbian nationalism. The primary motive was the desire to liberate the South Slavic peoples from Austro-Hungarian rule and to create a unified and independent state. The historical record, including trial transcripts and confessions from the assassins themselves, overwhelmingly supports the conclusion that they were driven by this revolutionary political goal. According to this established narrative, the subsequent outbreak of World War I was a tragic but direct consequence of a series of political miscalculations and rigid alliance commitments. Following the assassination, Austria-Hungary, determined to crush the Serbian nationalist threat once and for all, issued an ultimatum to Serbia with terms so harsh they were almost impossible to accept. When Serbia failed to comply fully, Austria-Hungary declared war on July 28, 1914. This single act triggered the domino effect of the European alliance system, inexorably drawing the great powers into a devastating global conflict. This interpretation emphasizes that while the assassination was the immediate trigger, the war's deeper causes were the pre-existing conditions of militarism, imperialism, nationalism, and the tangled alliance system. Historians generally agree that the great powers of Europe had been on a collision course for years, and the events in Sarajevo simply provided the final push over the edge. The focus of mainstream analysis is on the actions and decisions of the governments in Vienna, Belgrade, Berlin, St. Petersburg, and Paris, seeing the war as a catastrophic failure of diplomacy rather than a premeditated plot by any single actor. In this view, the involvement of other nations like Britain is seen as a reaction to the escalating crisis, not as a cause of it. Britain's decision to enter the war is understood as a response to Germany's invasion of neutral Belgium, an act that violated international treaties and directly threatened British security interests by placing a hostile power on the Channel coast. The mainstream consensus, therefore, dismisses the idea of a secret British plot as lacking credible evidence, attributing the start of the war to the known actions of the Serbian nationalists and the subsequent diplomatic failures of the European powers. In stark contrast to the accepted historical narrative, a compelling revisionist theory proposes a far more clandestine and manipulative origin for World War I. This alternative perspective suggests that British intelligence may have secretly orchestrated, or at least encouraged, the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand. The motive behind this alleged plot was to protect Britain's global empire and preemptively neutralize its most formidable rivals. According to this theory, Britain saw the growing power of Germany and its potential alliance with Russia as a grave threat to its long-held position of global dominance, which it was determined to preserve. The proponents of this theory argue that British strategists feared the creation of a Eurasian superbloc controlled by Germany and Russia, which would have the resources and industrial might to challenge the British Empire across the globe. By instigating a major European war, Britain could ensure its two greatest rivals would exhaust themselves fighting each other. The assassination in Sarajevo is presented as the perfect catalyst for such a conflict. A carefully managed crisis in the Balkans could be used to shatter the German-Russian relationship and draw both empires into a mutually destructive war, leaving Britain to pick up the pieces. This revisionist view suggests that British intelligence could have been involved in several ways. They might have used secret agents to influence or provide support to radical groups like the Black Hand, subtly guiding their actions toward a specific target and outcome without revealing their true identity. The theory posits that figures within the Serbian nationalist movement could have been unwitting pawns or even paid assets of a foreign power. By manipulating events from the shadows, British intelligence could have ensured that the assassination would successfully trigger the desired chain reaction of declarations of war across the continent. While this theory is highly controversial and lacks the kind of direct, verifiable evidence that mainstream historians demand, it offers a chilling reinterpretation of the events of 1914. It transforms the start of the war from a tragic accident of failed diplomacy into a deliberately engineered catastrophe. It portrays Britain not as a reluctant participant defending international law, but as a ruthless puppet master willing to sacrifice millions of lives to secure its own imperial interests. This provocative idea challenges us to look beyond the official story and consider the darker possibilities of statecraft and secret intelligence operations. The chasm between the mainstream historical account and the revisionist theory of British involvement is vast, primarily defined by the nature of the evidence each side relies on. Mainstream history is built upon a foundation of verifiable sources: official government documents, diplomatic cables, trial records, memoirs, and contemporary newspaper accounts. These sources provide a clear, albeit complex timeline of events, showing how the actions of Serbian nationalists and the reactions of European governments led to war. The evidence points to a crisis that spiraled out of control, not a meticulously planned conspiracy orchestrated from London. The revisionist theory, on the other hand, relies heavily on circumstantial evidence, connecting disparate events and interpreting motives through the lens of grand strategy. Lacking a smoking gun document or a direct confession, proponents of this view build their case by highlighting Britain's strategic imperatives and pointing to inconsistencies or convenient coincidences in the historical record. They argue that the absence of direct evidence is precisely what one would expect from a successful and highly secretive intelligence operation. This makes the theory compelling to some, but speculative and unprovable in the eyes of most professional historians. Despite the lack of solid proof, such revisionist theories continue to attract attention for several reasons. They appeal to a natural human fascination with conspiracies and secret histories, suggesting that the truth is far more complex and sinister than what is commonly taught. The idea that powerful, shadowy figures are manipulating world events from behind the scenes is a powerful and enduring narrative. It also speaks to a deep-seated cynicism about the motives of governments and empires, suggesting that nations will stop at nothing to protect and expand their power, even if it means orchestrating a global war. Ultimately, the debate highlights a fundamental tension in the study of history between what can be proven and what can be plausibly inferred. The mainstream view holds fast to the principle that historical claims must be supported by direct and robust evidence. The revisionist perspective argues that in the world of espionage and covert operations, one must learn to read between the lines and connect the dots. While the theory of a British plot remains on the fringes of historical scholarship, its persistence demonstrates our ongoing struggle to fully comprehend the monumental tragedy of the First World War. The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand is one of the most consequential crimes in modern history. Yet more than a century later, it remains shrouded in a degree of mystery. While the identities of the assassins and their immediate backers in the Black Hand are well established, the full extent of the conspiracy continues to be debated. The precise nature of the relationship between the Black Hand and the official Serbian government, for example, is still a subject of scholarly argument. This ambiguity leaves room for alternative interpretations and ensures that the story of Sarajevo is never entirely settled, inviting new questions and theories. The enduring appeal of revisionist theories, such as the one implicating British intelligence, stems from this very ambiguity. When a single event has such disproportionately massive consequences, it is natural to question whether there were larger, unseen forces at play. The idea that the greatest war in history was sparked by a handful of young radicals and a series of diplomatic blunders can feel unsatisfying. Conspiracy theories offer a different kind of explanation, one that suggests order and intention, however malevolent, behind the apparent chaos of history, providing a sense of understanding, even if it is a disturbing one. The story also serves as a powerful and timeless reminder of the profound impact that targeted assassinations can have on the course of history. The killing of a single individual set in motion a chain of events that led to the collapse of 4 empires, the deaths of over 20 million people, and the redrawing of the world map. It demonstrates how a calculated act of political violence can unleash forces far beyond the control of its perpetrators, with devastating and unforeseen consequences. This lesson remains deeply relevant today, as nations continue to grapple with the use of assassination as a tool of state policy in a volatile world. In the end, whether the assassination was purely the work of Serbian nationalists or influenced by a hidden hand, its legacy is undeniable. It stands as a stark warning about the dangers of extreme nationalism, the fragility of international peace, and the unpredictable nature of history itself. The shots fired in Sarajevo continue to echo, because they mark a turning point, the end of an old world, and the violent birth of the modern era. The lingering questions surrounding the event ensure that we will continue to revisit the dusty streets of Sarajevo, searching for answers and trying to understand how humanity stumbled into such a catastrophic abyss.